Hi everyone, Alex at Corumdale Farm. We are a year 3 Oklahoma flower farm that sells retail market bouquets from our roadside stand. And in today's video, it's going to be awesome. I sat down for an interview with Jenny Marks at Trademarks Farm. She is a profitable, very successful, beautiful farm in New York, and we talk all things about how she grew her farm, how she became profitable, what she believes are the keys to success for a profitable farm. And I hope this discussion is inspirational and entertaining and helpful in your own flower farming journey, or if you just love learning about all things flowers. With Jenny Marks of Trademarks Flower Farm in New York. I'm going to let her intro herself because she'll do it so much better than me. But the way I would intro her is like the ranunculus queen, because everything I look at on her Instagram and in her content is so ranunculus focused. I know that's not everything she grows, and we'll talk about that, but she's a ranunculus pro, so we'll definitely ask her some of those questions. And she's also the Northeast Regional Director for the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. And so she just has so much wisdom for us, and I can't wait to go through and ask her all of these questions that I have, focused primarily on how do we run a profitable flower farm, because we can talk in detail about snapdragon spacing and whether you net or don't net something, but it ultimately doesn't matter if you're not a profitable business, so that you can keep growing year to year. So that's really what I want to focus on. So Jenny, can you tell us about your farm as it is now? So where you grow and generally where you sell, all of that kind of stuff.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Jenny and I own Trademarks Flower Farm, and I'm located in upstate New York. So we're like Western New York State, between Rochester and Syracuse in the Finger Lakes region. And so we're in zone 6A-ish, although I guess they just updated the USDA hardiness zone. So ours, I think, went up like to 6B or something. But anyways, we grow just on about 3/4 to 1 acre right now. And we have 6 hoop houses on our farm. So most of that acre is taken up by hoop houses. So we have 4 30 by 96 high tunnels, and then 2 about, I think they're like 17 by 96 caterpillar tunnels. And then we also have a 20 by 40 propagation house on our farm. So that's like a little bit of a lay of the land for us. And we are very focused on ranunculus. It's my favorite flower, and we grow a lot of it because we make a lot of money off of it. And that's basically how it's not how it became my favorite flower. It just so happily happened that it was one of my favorites. And we also did a cost analysis with everything we were growing on our farm, and that was one of the most profitable flowers we grew. So we decided to just really focus on it. So that's the main thing that we do. We grow between 9 and 10,000 ranunculus on our farm every year, but we also grow a few other things. We grow less than 15 crops on our flower farm though, so we're not crazy diversified. And every year we sort of narrow that a little bit more and more and refine our farm and our sales outlets even more. So we sell through 3 main sales outlets right now. We've done everything. There's like a whole story about it. But we mainly mainly sell through a farmer's market in our city nearby. that is really amazing. It's a wonderful farmers market for us. And we have a flower CSA program. And then we also sell dahlia tubers. So that's our main kind of gig that we do right now. And then I also have another business called Trademark Farmer, where I teach flowers about having a profitable business and all kinds of business skills and tools for running a flower farm. So it's very business focused. We don't talk a lot about growing. I mean, a little bit, but it's mostly profitability and business focused.
That's awesome. I'm sure like everyone watching, like their eyes got big when you were like, we grow 10,000 ranunculus. It's incredible. It's incredible. But I always think, so we're heading into year 3. So it's like on our channel, we debated like, do we say year 2 or year 3? Because we planted for year 3, but we aren't selling yet in year 3. And when I look on Instagram and YouTube and all of that, and you see like the year 6 plus farms that are growing like you are with the amount of like structures you have and different sales outlets, it's hard to make the jump of like, well, you didn't start in year 1 with 6 high tunnels and planting 10,000 ranunculus. There obviously was a progression. And so I'd love to kind of walk through like the scaling up journey your farm went through. So like if you could tell us, what does like year 1 look like? And then maybe if you remember a bit, like how you scaled up, like what you chose to invest in year 2 or 3, or basically how did you get to the point that you just described to us?
Yeah. So it is really challenging, I'm sure, for farmers that are just starting out and seeing people with tons of infrastructure and stuff. And it is hard to make like that reach between first starting and that, like that gap when you get there. And when I first started, I was very, very, very small. I think our first flower garden was like, I don't even know, probably like 25 feet wide by, I don't know, like up 50 feet long, if that. So it was a garden. It was a big garden. And so I grew up working on farms. I grew up working in all different facets of agriculture. So I was always really involved in agriculture of some kind. So farm work was not new to me at all, but flowers were. And so I really had no idea what I was doing when I started. Growing flowers, learning to grow them was like this huge learning curve. So I started off really small with just a little garden. And then for the first few years, it didn't get a whole lot bigger than that. And I honestly really struggled to get the business going. I didn't make hardly any sales.
Were you
Probably
selling
my first,
like on farm sales, or were you like going to a smaller farmer's market, or how were you trying to sell?
so I was trying to sell through a CSA
Okay.
and also some smaller farmers markets. And then I also did some weddings. So I was kind of like dabbling, and I also sold to florists.
You were kind of like, how can I sell my flowers? Like where can I go?
I literally was just like, I'm going to try everything and see what, like, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Okay.
And like, I really wanted to do a farmer's market and a CSA because I came from the vegetable farming world. And that's like what I knew from veggie farming.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my first ventures into it. But like my first year, I only had one CSA member, and it was a friend of mine. My second year, I only had 2 CSA members, that friend and her mom. So like the first few years, it was really terrible because I just like couldn't sell my flowers. But then probably around like, I don't know, year 3 of me growing flowers, I got into a really good farmer's market, and that changed everything for me. It's a really difficult farmer's market to get into because it's very successful. And that kind of launched my business and my confidence because I was able to start putting myself out there more. And I also started learning about marketing and selling at this point. So by then I was able to get my CSA up to, I think one year I had like 15 people, and then the following year I had 50. So that was kind of a big jump. So learning how to sell flowers was my biggest roadblock during that time because I could grow beautiful flowers, like they were gorgeous, but I had a really hard time figuring out how to sell them and how to make money. And so that was my biggest like learning curve. But then as far as like infrastructure and investing on the farm, the first year, I think I can't even barely remember, but I think the first year I know I did not have a flower cooler. And then the second year, I bought like a really cheap used beverage cooler off Craigslist. And I don't even know if people use Craigslist anymore. It was the old Facebook
It was the
Marketplace.
thing.
And it froze my flowers a couple of times, but most of
Perfect.
the time it worked okay. And then after that, I bought another like a used freezer truck bed that I converted into a cooler, and we put up our first greenhouse because I hated started season in the house. It like didn't work
Okay.
at all for me. And then, we've always bought used cheap stuff and just made it work until we could afford to buy new things. So the two caterpillar tunnels that we have on our farm, I bought used from another vegetable farmer, and I paid $1,000 for two of them. We took
Wow.
them down, put them up ourselves, like did things like the hard way and just kind of bought cheap stuff that we could afford. And then after a few years, we had a lot more money saved up that I could invest into building a new barn. And, we just approached saving very strategically.
Okay.
We've built our whole farm debt free. Like I've never taken out a loan for anything on the farm. I just took everything we made and reinvested it. And I did that because I also started my business as a side hustle. I worked a full-time on farm or off farm job. I worked for the government, and then I had my flower farm on the side. So, I kept my income from the government to pay like our bills. And
Right.
then whatever I made from the farm, I just like dumped it back in for the first like 4 years.
Yeah. What year would you say was like in your memory, like a big tipping point? Like, we're really serious now. We're going to build a high tunnel, not a caterpillar tunnel. We're going to bootstrap a little bit less. Like, I'm going in on this. Around what year would you
I
say?
would say year 3 for me.
Okay.
And that, yeah, it was
And that was
probably
the year you got into the farmer's market
yeah,
and you were starting to sell a lot more.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I think I had a mindset shift around that time. Like I had sort of been doing the flowers, but I wasn't never serious about making it a full-time or like really serious thing for me. And then I got to a point where I just like really needed a life change. And once I made that mindset shift to I can do this full time, I know I can, I'm going to figure it out no matter what, like everything just started falling into place. So
Mhm.
I think that that has a lot to do with people's success more than they would like to admit as well.
Yeah. The perspective they bring into it with their labor and their time and like what they're trying to achieve can had a big difference, you would say. Like the side hustle mindset versus like, I want this to be my life or a big part of my family's life.
Yeah, or just really clarifying your goals as well.
Yeah.
Like I think the first few years I just was sort of wishy-washy, like didn't really know exactly what I wanted from this. And then when I got really, really clear about exactly what I wanted, um, everything just got so much easier. And I had to do a lot of like deep introspective work to like unearth that, I think. And I talk about that a lot with Trademark Farmer and when I teach other farmers. And, it's a small piece of what I teach, but I think it's really important because you need to clarify those goals in order to take the right strategic steps to get there.
I was gonna say it probably brings into clarity your decision-making process much clearer, especially when you're seeking profitability. If it's a really joyful side hustle where there's nothing wrong with that, your decision making for spending is going to be very different than like, I would like to quit my job so that this can be income. You might make a different spending or investment choice when you're thinking those different ways. Okay, so what
Exactly.
year are you in now?
Ah,
Or
16th.
right?
I will be going into my
Ninth
ninth.
year.
Yeah,
Have you,
growing flowers.
was there a time, like a year time where you're like, okay, we've really dialed this in, like this is our capacity, these are our sales outlets, this is what we like to grow, and we're kind of on like not autopilot because it's still a ton of work, but kind of like we're in repeat mode versus like forever scaling up mode. Have
Mhm.
you hit that? Is that kind of where you're at now?
Yes. And this is a really great question because if you had asked me this probably 2 years ago, I was in full growth mode. We're just going to keep growing and keep growing and keep growing, like until we can't grow anymore. Like I had plans for our farm to be like 60 acres, like really seriously big.
Let
But
me
then
pause real fast. Do you have employees or is it you and your husband
no,
primarily? What's the
I
staff?
do have employees.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and my husband works an off farm job. He has like his own full time thing, not associated with our farm. And he does work on our farm, like with big projects. So
Yeah.
he's like a construction guy. So he's super handy when we're doing infrastructure projects like building hoop houses
Yeah.
or like we just put in a new water line
Okay.
and, heavy equipment, machinery, stuff like that. But he's really like not involved at all with
Got
the
it.
day to day stuff.
Okay.
I like manage the whole farm and am involved in all the day to day, but I also have one full time employee during the season. And then depending on the time of year, we have like 2 to 3 part time employees as well.
During
So
like
we're still really
peak
small.
times and stuff.
Yeah, like like in the springtime when we're really busy and in the fall,
Okay.
we have a couple other like per diem people that come on.
Okay.
But actually that was a really key deciding factor in me changing from that always growing growth mindset to like sort of settling on the business model we're in now.
Okay.
So a quick story is I basically at one point a couple years ago hired a whole bunch of people because we were growing like crazy and we were selling through a bunch of different sales outlets and the farm was doing really well. But I was not. I
Okay.
was getting completely overwhelmed and we had some labor struggles like finding people that were reliable and would come back year after year, which is like always the struggle with any small business. And at some point, I just found myself getting like run really ragged and was just trying to do too much. So I got really, really serious about looking at our highest profitability sales outlets, the ones that brought in money for us, but also ones that I really liked doing
Okay.
because the stuff that you like doing, you're going to do the best job at it.
The
You
better
know,
attitude.
Exactly. And just really honed in on that from there. So I would say it was probably about 2 years ago. And like I am not a very smart person. Like I feel like I should have figured all this out like a long time ago, which is why I teach it now because it just feels like it took me such a long time to like figure out where I belong and what I really want out of this and like how to do it in a way that brings me joy and freedom and profitability in like a healthy, sustainable way.
Right.
So that yeah,
Your
it
your
takes a
your
lot.
your sales potential could have had you in like forever growth mode, but at some point you had to make like a lifestyle choice in the sense of like I'm happy at this level
Mhm.
across all factors, like emotionally, physically, mentally, like this is kind of my sweet spot and I want to stay here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you talk about, you mentioned in your intro, you only grow like 15 or less varieties. Was that always the case? Or how did you start? Yeah, I was going to assume not, but like, how did you start? And then when did you start making like the more dialed in choices? And how did you make those choices? Like, when did you were like, well, I don't know if we should be growing however much you were.
100 different kinds of flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I first started growing flowers, the flower world was completely new to me. Like I knew nothing about flowers when I started growing them. And I saw like people on the internet, like Florette, for example,
Yeah.
who had like on I'm just going to use Florette as an example because everyone knows who she is, but like on her website, in her blogs, she has hundreds of flowers and foliages cataloged, and she sells hundreds of different kinds. And so I was just like, oh, well, I just need to grow all of this. And, the couple of flower farmers that I did know grew a lot of different kinds of flowers. And so I just thought that that's like what you had to do or what you were
Yeah.
supposed to do. So I grew like I don't even know how many, it was probably close to 100 different types of flowers. And I remember feeling really overwhelmed. Things got really overgrown. They weren't being taken care of well. Like I wasn't weeding as well as I should have, wasn't netting stuff that should have been, that was like falling
Right.
over. And at the end of one season, it was probably like year 4 for me. If I had, yeah, it was probably like year 4. It was fall time and we were cleaning up the farm and I was growing over a half an acre of flowers. It might have been even close to an acre. And
Yeah.
I remember looking out and was just saw so many flowers sitting out in the field and thinking to myself, I worked so incredibly hard to start all these seeds, put them in the ground, take care of them all season. And then I didn't even harvest most of them for
Mm.
one reason or another, like whether it was just like too much hassle to harvest, or I didn't really need it when I was making mixed bouquets, or whatever reason. And I was like, I'm literally just throwing money away by growing all these different things. And that's about the time when I figured out how to calculate the ability of my flower crops using an enterprise budget analysis process.
Okay.
And so basically, you just figure out how profitable each one of those flowers is. So I cut out some stuff just because I was like, I just don't want to grow things like Didiscus or flowering tobacco anymore. It just wasn't my thing. But then I took an inventory of all the flowers that we sold, significant quantities of on the farm, and figured out the profitability of all of them, ranked them in a list from most profitable to least profitable. Then I cut out the bottom half of the list.
Got it.
And then over the years, we've just been refining more and more and more and focusing more and more on things that we do really well and that our customers really like,
Right.
or places that we see like opportunities for growth. So we really only focus on like 1 to 2 flowers per season. Like in the springtime, we really just do all ranunculus, which is why we grow 9 or 10,000 of them, because that's like literally the only thing that we grow. And then in the late spring, in June for us is like peony season. We're
Okay.
really only growing like 3 types of annuals right now, and no, like 2 annuals and 2 perennials. So we grow peonies, baptisia, which are just easy perennials, and then campanula and snapdragons.
Okay.
So, and that's how we kind of treat the whole season, is that we really focus on just a couple of really highly profitable flowers that our customers love, that are easy for us to grow.
Mhm. It seems like observationally, and I don't necessarily fall into this category, and I'm thankful for it. I think it's one of the reasons why we are reaching profitability faster on our farm than maybe would be like average. But when I'm on like flower farming Facebook groups and stuff, it seems like new growers fall into one of two categories with the deciding the varieties to grow. And it's either they decided to flower farm because they just absolutely love flowers. And so, they want to be in flowers, they want to be around flowers. It's very emotional, which is not a bad thing. You should love what you do. And so it's very hard to say no, because you open like the Johnny Seed catalog and it's like, how do you emotionally not grow, all of these things that you want to see in person, you want to have in your farm. And then the other side is kind of what you described, which is you're observing whichever flower farms you decide are influential to you, and you look at maybe their grow list and think, well, that's just what flower farming is, and so I need to cut and paste on my farm. And often those farms, are year 6, 7, and they're making decisions of why they grow what their grow list is, and so it's not necessarily like a cut and paste capacity. And so without having to go through, like you said, kind of like the painful, slow learning process, what would your advice be on like either someone who's aspiring to be a flower farmer, or they're like in year 1 and 2 and they're kind of saying like, they're thinking to themselves right now, like, yeah, I'm drowning in a bit too many varieties, but I'm not at a point yet in my business where I feel like I can get my arms around how to make a profitability assessment because things are still so new and I don't even know how to make that calculation, or I haven't sold a flower yet, so I don't even know what my costs are yet. What would be some kind of like questions they should ask themselves or things to think through to kind of not have that 100 long variety list of Johnny's catalog?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I would say that observationally, look at flower farms that really inspire you and that you think you would want to have a similar business model to, because there's just endless amounts or endless kinds of business models that you can have. Like you could have a CSA and farmers market model like me, or you could be farmer florist and sell, a la carte wedding bouquets. And so there's just so many different sales outlets you can do. And I would say find a farmer who is sort of specializing in what you want to do as terms of sales outlets and look at what they're doing. You can't just look at someone else and you can never know their numbers. You can never know what's going on behind the scenes,
Right.
but it might be able to help you make decisions up front as to what you should be growing, or, if you have a similar customer base to somebody else, maybe what their customers are liking. So I feel like I sort of did that when I started. Like I saw other farms that I really wanted to kind of model my farm off of, like certainly not copy, but I liked their business model. And so I tried to grow things that they grew. And I think that's really helpful when you're first starting out. Like I said, you can't know what everyone's books look like. I would bet money that some of these like very influential, famous Instagram, armloads of flower picture people, like their profits might not be what you would think.
Yeah.
And so it's just something to be careful about that. And then on the other hand, I don't think it's ever too early to do a profitability assessment. In fact, if I was to start another business right now of any kind, I would sit down and try to figure out the numbers. Like, how much profit do I need to make? What kind of profit margin should I be working off of? How much gross revenue do I need to bring in? And like, what do I need to do to make that? So like for a flower farm, let's just say, well, you sell at a roadside stand,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's say you wanted to make like, I don't know, $10,000 and you sell, I got to get my calculator out for this because I'm that bad at math, but like if you, let's say
Said
make,
it wrong, I wouldn't have corrected you because I wouldn't be able to do it either.
yeah, got my handy dandy calculator.
Perfect.
So let's say you want to make $10,000 and you sell all your bouquets for 25 bucks. That
Yeah.
means you got to sell 400 bouquets over your season. And if your season is 30 weeks long, that means you have to sell 13 and a half bouquets. So
You're like
14 bouquets.
working backwards from a big goal.
Yeah. And at least just get started with that. And I think you can always sort of guesstimate your expenses, or you can take a course. Like I teach a course called Six Figure Farming, and we go over all of this stuff in here, like what you could expect your profit margins to be. And of course, that is what varies widely depending on your business model. But we go into detail about how to guesstimate your expenses up front and then tracking your expenses over the course of a season and really dialing in to see like what kind of money are you actually making. And if nothing else, if you just keep track of your income and your expenses, which you have to do anyways for the IRS if you're going to have a real business, it can be really eye-opening. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
what you're saying too is that like you don't have to wait until you're like in the hole and like panicking. And you also don't have to wait until you have a couple years under your belt to start making these choices, or at the very least be aware of the type of information you're going to need to collect and track in order to make the smartest decisions moving forward. Like you can really start from the beginning with seeking profitability for your business. It doesn't have to be drowning in 100 varieties and losing money to then start.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And anyone who's just starting, if you haven't started yet, or maybe you're like a year or two in, like I highly suggest that you do that from the very beginning. Like make a plan to be profitable from the beginning or very early on and just figure out your finances from there, because no one can operate a flower farm, whether hobby or business, on $0. It just doesn't work.
I know it, like you said, depending on your business model and like what you're seeking after, this answer is going to be different. But what would you say on average is a very realistic goal towards profitability? Now, of course, like if you have $100 extra, like in the black, you're technically profitable. But so like the polls being like you had an extra $100 and you can live on this income profitability, like obviously both ends of the spectrum, but like general profitability, like I have a good enough amount of money remaining after all of my expenses are paid off. What do you think is a realistic goal for that to happen? Like, does this have to wait until year 5? Can this be achieved like more of the year 3 time frame? Because you hear a lot, especially like on the Instagram space and stuff, like a big spectrum of like, I'm seeking to be profitable by year X. And I always wonder like, but can you be profitable sooner? Like what's realistic in the flower farming world when we're talking about profitability?
Yeah. So for one, I think it depends a lot on your experience, but just assuming that someone starting out has zero experience, I would say you can be technically profitable from year 1, just meaning that you make more money than you spend. So you can technically make $100 in profit your first year. You can even make more than that.
Right.
However, in order to make the kind of profit where you're paying yourself a livable wage, I would say it's different for everyone and it depends on your business
Yeah, it's
model.
super subjective, but
It is super, super subjective. But I would say realistically, for most people, I would say year 3 to 4 is when you're going to be hitting that 6-figure mark in gross revenue, which is like what everybody wants to do.
right, yeah. But your
But that
expenses are
six
not 6
figure,
figures.
right? Well, that 6-figure revenue number is going to allow you to earn and pay yourself a realistic, like living wage that you can live off of. And I think it is going to take a very beginner with zero experience, probably 3 years to get there. And like I said, you could maybe do it on year 1, but chances are it's probably going to take you a couple years to figure this out and get there.
That like
But
comfortable margin between your gross revenue and your expenses should start happening like year 3, year
yeah,
4.
yeah.
That's
I
encouraging
think so.
because like sometimes you hear profitability numbers in years like 5, 6, and
Mhm.
I think in one sense it can feel defeating or discouraging because you're like, well, how long do you operate a business at a loss?
Mhm.
Because
Well,
everyone's bringing different income
mhm.
to the equation, like the side income, like your full-time job, that like what's a realistic perspective of like, no, this farm can actually not be losing money or a drain, it can start heading in the other direction.
Well, I think that this all really depends on your goals for one and your financial management
Okay.
skills. Because if your goal on year 5 and 6 is to keep growing bigger and bigger, you're going to have to keep reinvesting your profits back into the farm.
Good
And
point.
so, we can get into so many like little
Yeah.
technicalities here because I commented on some Instagram post the other day because there was a woman who said she puts every dollar that she makes back into her farm. She still hasn't made a profit and she's on year 10. And I was like, why on earth, unless you're like wanting to grow your business like huge, like why would you do that? And she's like, oh, but I just think that somebody like that is either has crazy goals where they just want their farm to be like massive, or they're not managing their finances appropriately.
I got it.
Because
Yeah.
the profit that comes from your farm, in most people's cases, like if you're a sole proprietor or an LLC, like we don't need to get into like business structure stuff, but if you're just starting out and you're a sole proprietor, all the profit that you make from your farm goes to pay you plus any investments that go back into your farm. So your operating expenses, they should always yield you a profit. And then any of that profit you can reinvest back into the farm. So
Right.
we're getting kind of like technical all this here, but
Sure.
I just really think that if I were to start over again, I would make a plan to pay myself from the very, very beginning, like year 1, even if it was only like $100 a month, just to get into that practice of paying yourself and then upping that number whenever you can or whenever you see
Sure.
fit. And I'm a big proponent of planning for your profit first before anything else, like paying yourself first before you make investments back into the business. And it took me years to learn that. I didn't do that with my business, but I think that that's a really important piece of being an entrepreneur.
Right. I think, no, I think that's helpful because like you said, we can get into the weeds, or it can be very subjective farm to farm. But, in the YouTube space or in the Instagram space and stuff, like you said, you can't know people's books. You can just know what you hear. And you can hear a lot of kind of the equivalent of like the flower bunch shot. You can hear a lot of like, I'm seeking to be profitable in X year down the road. And all you're seeing is just like endless expenses and expansion, but they're not profitable yet. And that can give you the kind of like with the seed catalog, that can give you the impression that like, well, this is just how you build a flower farm. You have to spend tens of thousands of dollars for years and years and years. And then eventually down the road, you'll be profitable. But really what you're saying is like, no, back it up from the very beginning in how you're planning towards profitability and managing your expenses and managing your expansion. And you can actually hit that a lot sooner. That doesn't mean you're going to hit your ultimate goal. Maybe you're not yet at that six figures, but you grossed 40,000 and you only spent 20,000. It's like, well, that is a huge win that could happen in year 3 instead of the endless expansion model, I think, which is often what is seen on social media and can give an impression that is not maybe the reality. And the reality is actually more positive. So like, that's a good thing. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So like you said, going back to what you said about in year 1 and 2, where you're like, I could grow beautiful flowers. I got confident. I learned how to grow them, but I needed to sell them. And you got into the farmer's market and stuff. But can you talk a little bit about how you found customers, how you grew your CSA? Like, what did the social media and the marketing and the actually selling the flowers look like for you as your farm expanded? Because you didn't just plant 10,000 ranunculus and people were breaking down your doors. You clearly built a customer base that then matched with your scaling up in the amount of flowers you grow.
Yeah, well, and that's the hard part, is trying to guess how many you need to grow in order to meet your sales goals, which I actually, side note, but I do have a profit planning free course on my website right now that actually talks just about that. Like,
We'll link to it in the description.
okay, yeah, it's all about doing your crop planning based on your sales goals and your sales projections. But anyways, that's another thing. But so I got really interested in marketing and sales, and because I really stunk at it, and I was like, I need to figure out how to sell things. And so I read a bunch of books, and I took an online marketing course and just really started thinking about who my customer was, like who my ideal customer was, and seeking that person out, like going to go find them. So for example, I really wanted to grow my CSA. And the people who are in my CSA already, I sort of interviewed them, and like any chance I got to talk to them, I tried to get to know them and what they were like. And most of these people were a little bit I don't want to say wealthier, but they were like better off. They had some extra indisposable income. They all loved supporting the local businesses around, especially like we have a lot of wineries and breweries where we live. Like there's all these little like micro brews and stuff. And they loved going there and loved going to the little wine bars and stuff. And I just would talk to them and see what they like doing in their spare time. So I started going to the places that they mentioned they like to hang out at. So I started advertising and partnering with other local businesses like wine bars, microbreweries, like little coffee shops, and asking if we could do a CSA pickup there. I would give them flowers and get people in the door for them on slower days of the week in exchange for us having a flower pickup there. And then things like really took off when I started doing that. It was super helpful to basically just trying to go find them. And of course, like I started posting on Instagram, which I think was way more effective back then when I started. And we're talking about like 2017, 18
The
era.
algorithm was different back then. Like,
Yeah, it was very different.
the space. Yeah.
Exactly. But just trying to go out and find my customer. And then as I got more experienced, I started learning more about email marketing, and I made opt-ins and lead magnets to attract people to my website. I started focusing on SEO, which is search engine optimization. So when people searched for flowers in Rochester, New York, my website came up. And then when they clicked on my website, I had something that was really enticing to get them on my email list. And then once I got them on my email list, I would send them fun emails or give them a deal or educational stuff and form a relationship that way and hopefully get them to sign up for our CSA. So that's how I ended up getting more customers, is just really thinking about who my ideal customer was and where they're hanging out and where I can go find them. So I went out and just like kept trying to find them, kept trying to reach them.
That's great. I like that proactive view, because often you'll see or hear, like again on the Facebook groups and stuff, where you just hear flower farmers talking and stuff. It's like, I grew all these flowers and I posted a picture about them on Facebook and no one came and bought them from me.
Did you read my story?
What you did in the beginning?
Yes.
Well, it's definitely the, like, again, it makes sense, because like you got into it, most people get into it because they love flowers, and so they want to grow flowers, they want to share flowers. So then sometimes you can think like, well, everyone loves flowers as much as I do, so if I grow them, people will be like breaking down my door to buy them. And then once the flowers are there and you're looking around and you're like, wait, there's more steps. And so I really like that idea of thinking about what your ideal customer looks like and then thinking like them and going to find them instead of overly. Obviously you have to have a good product. Like if you have a really ugly sunflower, you're not going to get a customer. But to be, sometimes our heads can be so downward focused on the actual growing that we don't lift our head up until the sunflower is blooming. And then you're like, but that time is over now to find that customer to sell that flower to. And so that's encouraging that you can go out and seek them and put that work in. You had mentioned like throwing spaghetti at the wall in the beginning of like where to sell your flowers. Is it largely because of your veggie background that you're like, I really want to do farmers market and CSA, and so I'm going to be really proactive in making those work? Or did that end up being how your customers wanted to buy from you? Because what I also see is, just like you grow every variety of flower, you then try to sell your flowers in every possible way a flower farmer can. And you have hundreds of varieties and you have 6 different sales outlets, and no one can do that with excellence. And so how would you recommend, or how did you kind of narrow down, like, this is what we talked about, how you decided what to grow, and then you're like, and this is how I sell what I grow?
Yeah, so it was sort of like they happened sort of simultaneously. Like I started out with my CSA and the farmers market, and very early on was selling to event florists as well. And then I was like, well, if I'm selling these flowers to event florists, why don't I just do the weddings myself? So then I added that on as well. So, and then I was like, oh, well, I could have people come to the farm and we could do workshops and, do retail things like that. So we just sort of kept tacking on sales outlets for a while until I got to a point where I looked at what we were doing. And for one, some of the sales outlets were extremely time consuming and didn't bring in that much profit. So for me, it was actually selling to florists, because the communication required with a lot of my florist customers was just like absurd. And they were only, sometimes they'd put in big orders, but it just wasn't worth the time for me. So I did that cost analysis with each of my sales outlets. But I also looked at which ones I really liked to do, which was kind of always the CSA and the farmers market. That's just like my avenue that I was comfortable with and that I wanted to do. And then I looked at the customers that were already purchasing from us and spending a lot of money from us, and it was through the CSA and the farmers market. So that's why we decided to sort of finally settle on that. And so I would say, and I teach this in my 6-figure farming online course as well, that if you're just starting out and you're really not sure what sales outlet you want to do, like of course you can test everything, but I think the smarter way to go about it is to put pen to paper and actually write out which of the sales outlets you're interested in pursuing are the most profitable, because that is important, but then also taking into consideration where your strengths lie and the opportunities in your area, and sort of combining all that information to make a decision. And also, I want to include your ideal customer in there as well, because there are certain types of people you do want to work with and other people you don't.
You mean if
So
your ideal customer is not like the mother of a bride,
yeah.
you couldn't do weddings?
Yeah,
Subtly.
exactly. Yeah, if you're not like, for me, I don't love like high ticket price items like wedding packages require a lot of like one-on-one time and a lot of communication with one person or two people. And that is really well suited to some people's personalities. But for me, I just don't have the patience to be like communicating with people that much. And so with the CSA and my farmers market, I show up and it's just like, hey, hi, how you doing? And back and forth with like a bunch of different people. It's not like highly, I don't, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You're not just like spending all this time
That's
catering to one
super
person.
personalized.
Yeah,
Oh,
personalized.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think it depends on like your personality and what you like to do. And then, sometimes the thing that you love, like I call this the magic middle. Like there's the thing that you love to do, and then there's the thing that people want. Like you sometimes need to just do what falls in the middle, because it depends on the area that you're in. Like for me, I have a wonderful farmers market that is really profitable for us, and it's just great. But in a lot of areas, there are not good farmers markets to go to. They're not established. They're little rinky dink things that like 10 people come to. So, maybe there's another example that I live in an area in the Finger Lakes region in New York where there's a lot of weddings. It's like a wedding destination area for people from New York City. And we're like 7 hours from the city, but like it's still a destination area for them. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for either doing weddings yourself or selling to wedding and event florists. So looking at like the opportunities and any gaps in the market in your area can also help you decide what you want to focus on. So there's a lot of different facets that go into this decision making. Like it's never going to be cut and dry. It's never going to be like super easy. If you like know what you want to do, like if you know you want to have a roadside stand and that's the only thing that you want to do, you can go out there and make it work. Like
Yeah.
just decide you want to do it and go do it. But,
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't really sure what they want to do. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I like what you said about like you can try things, but you don't have to like throw everything at once and think that like one is just going to magically appear as the winner, because you're already stressed and spread so thin, growing a million things, selling a million different ways, that if you like do it maybe in even almost like smaller pieces. Like I tried farmers markets and I realized like I'm an introvert and I was just so exhausted at the end of the day. That was such a drain. That's not for me. Then maybe try like maybe going the wholesale route is like better suited to you, instead of like, I'm going to go to a farmer's market and I'm going to sell to florists and I'm going to do events like all in the same thing. That can be, I think I would feel really defeating, but I only sell one way. So I'm very
Yeah.
streamlined.
I don't recommend just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. If anything, just pick one or two things and just give it your all. And then if it doesn't work, you just make adjustments,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That patient, like longer game view of things, that like, I don't have to be a 6-figure farm that grows everything and sells it in all ways in year 2. Like there's time to get to your goals and
And
figure out
I
what
would
you
even,
love.
yes, yes. And I would even argue that the more simplified and streamlined you are from the beginning, the easier it's going to be to reach profitability, because you're able to focus and do that one or two things really, really well. Like you and your roadside stand, like that's all you do. You are doing an amazing job at it, and people will know you for that.
Yeah.
Whereas like people who try to sell through like 7 different sales outlets, like you're not known for anything, and like you don't come to mind for specific needs. So
Yeah, it's not a specialized thing. So you kind
yeah,
of answered this in piecemeal format but to kind of like bring it together. Like if you were to start like go back to where you were in your flower knowledge, where it's like you can kind of competently grow and you wanted to start a flower farm in 2024. Walk me through kind of like what would you do? Not necessarily like I would grow this and sell this way, but like what would your thought process be? Like you mentioned the profit analysis that you would do up front, and like maybe like what steps would you take to start a flower farm that would kind of avoid the pitfalls that you said, you know, you fell into the first couple years?
with the experience that I have now, I know like exactly how I would start over, exactly what I would do. You know, back when I first started, I didn't know any better. And so if I were to start over at the very beginning, like with none of the knowledge I have now, other than I should be more focused and you know, try to hone in on what I'm doing, I think I would sit down and get really, really clear on exactly what I wanted from this project. Like, let's say, for example, that I wanted to have a full-time flower farm and that's how I wanted to earn my living. And then I would get really clear on what I wanted my life to look like.
Okay.
So, do I want to work weekends? Do I not want to work weekends? Do I want to work with, high end customers, or do I want to work with a different type of customer? And thinking about how you can structure your life around your business.
Mm.
And this is an exercise we do in my online course where you just get really, really clear on exactly what you need from this business and then make decisions from there. So, keeping things really simple at first, I think, can be a lifesaver because most people, just like we've been talking about, throw spaghetti at the wall, try to grow everything, try to sell everywhere and see what sticks. Whereas if you're much more intentional about it, just deciding that you're going to do one thing and everything you grow is catered to that one thing. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, if I were to start over and I wanted to sell to wedding and event florists only,
Mm.
I would go ask them, what flowers do you want? What flowers do you need? What colors do you want? What colors do you need? Or at least really think about what they want and then only grow those things. Like probably only growing flowers in like the blush to salmon and coral range. And I know there's some florists out there who use color, but like most of their clients don't. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if that answers your question, but just getting really, really clear
No,
on
it does,
sit down.
because observationally, and some of this is just stubbornness. Like at some point, you can't force people to listen if they want to do something different. But the thing I'm hearing from you, veteran growers, you like more OGs, is constantly saying, like, do less and scale back, but do it with excellence. And the trend of the aspiring grower or the newer growers is I want to grow everything and sell it in all ways. And it's like, you know, we're passing each other. And that's one of the focus on our channel, is to talk a lot about, and it's almost like sometimes I say like giving permission, which of course I have no authority to do so. But I think sometimes there can be that emotional hang up of like, well, but maybe I'm not as legit of a flower farmer if I only grow 10 flowers. Like that's not as interesting, or it's boring, or like I like in Oklahoma, it's super hard to grow dahlias. Like it's very hard for dahlias to pass the profitability test. But I go on Instagram and everyone in the Pacific Northwest and Midwest, you know, are just like drowning in dahlias in September. And so it's like, you know, being strong enough to be like, but no, like I live in Oklahoma and I've done my farm's profit analysis and it's not for me and I have to let it go, you know, and that's just how it is. And my farm can be profitable because of that decision. And I'm not getting into that like more emotional trap of like comparison and wanting to feel like, you're part of the flower farming club because your farm looks like the farms you want it to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I think it's really hard because you're so excited when you're starting out and you do want to grow everything. But you're honestly probably going to be so much better off if you just choose a few key things. Like you said, do less, but with excellence. And I think it's just so important. And that's like one of my things that I'm always preaching to people as well. And I think that all flower farmers eventually, when you're starting out growing all those different flowers and trying to do everything, at some point you are going to reach a point when you are just so burnt out and overwhelmed that you're going to be like, screw this. And then you're going to be forced to simplify, and like I did.
Yeah. It's like you can launch with that direction, or you can kind of like be forced in that direction. But like eventually you're going to pare down your list, and you pare down your sales streams and stuff. But do you want to do it in like tiers in your hoop house, or plan for it to be that way?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, so to end here, I want to talk about in a little more detail all of the teaching stuff you're doing. So you have your farm, like we've talked about, but you also launched Trademark Farmer with different social media, and you have your courses and stuff. So tell us a little more about what the courses are. We'll link all the ways for people to find you in the description, but kind of like what you have to offer, who it's for, how it can help people avoid the spaghetti and burnout.
I think I need to make that a tagline, avoid
Right?
the spaghetti. But it's so true. Yeah. So with Trademark Farmer, it's on our website. We have a bunch, and I say we, it's me. I have a bunch of information about growing a profitable farm, and it's all business skills. So business stuff like marketing and selling and analyzing profitability and planning your numbers, like crop planning for profit. And then also like clarity and getting really clear on what your goals are. So I just have a bunch of free information up on that website. It's www.trademarkfarmer.com. We also have some free mini courses on there. We have one on profit planning, which is, I mentioned earlier, but it's basically an advanced crop planning system that's based on your financial goals. We also have one that includes 5 tactics for starting a profitable farm, and then just some other free guides and like record keeping stuff and whatever. But then the big thing that I do is I teach both an on-farm and an online course called 6-Figure Flower Farming. And it encompasses actually a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. In the first module, we get really, really clear on your goals and what you want out of this business. So you can kind of stay simplified right from the beginning and go in with like some hard and fast goals that you can accomplish, not just like trying to do everything and see what sticks. And then in the second module, we really kind of go over redoing your business, like a business makeover, refining those sales outlets that you have and picking sales outlets that you can focus on and do really well at. And there's a bunch of different steps in there, like looking at the opportunities in your area, but also balancing it with what makes you money and makes you happy, because you just have to love what you're doing, like we talked about before. We talk a lot about the actual money stuff, like what you can expect from a flower farm as far as profit margins go, like whole farm profit margins, and actually planning out your profits and then budgeting for your expenses, making a sales plan for your revenue. We also talk about that enterprise budget analysis stuff that I talked to you about earlier. Basically looking at all the flowers that you grow or will grow and looking at what they're costing you, what's profiting you the most, and then making decisions on what to focus on based on that and your customer base. And then we also talk a lot about marketing, like really specific marketing stuff, like finding your ideal customers, email marketing, content marketing. We have like a whole system that we teach in there, and then like sales tactics. So basically these core business skills that you need to run a successful farming business, because of course you need to grow beautiful flowers, but quite honestly, I have found that the growing the flowers part is such a small piece of it. You can grow the most beautiful flowers in the world, but if you don't know how to sell them and how to market them, it's not going to do you any good. And I learned that the hard way. And on that same side of the coin, if you are trying to grow a million different flowers really well, chances are you're probably spending a lot of money to do that, and your profits are just not as high as they're supposed to be, or should be, or could be. And so it's all these things that we teach through Six Figure Flower Farming. And actually, the online course, the registration is launching on January 3rd. So we're getting really close to taking for that class to go live. So registration is on January 3rd, and then the class starts, it's all online the end of January and goes through the first week of March. It's a 6-week online course. And then we also do an in-person workshop on the farm over the summer, where that is much more focused on like profitable growing techniques. So like lean farming, lean, efficient weed management type stuff, and like on the, like in hands in the dirt type of stuff on the farm. But that's pretty much what I'm all about. And I would love for any beginning flower farmer who wants to start off on the right foot and actually be profitable as soon as possible, I recommend them taking the course, because I really think it's helped so many people and has the potential to help so many more people avoid the absolute mess that I went through trying to figure all of this stuff out. And that's why I started it, because it was such a struggle for me to get through those early years and figure all this out. And I just wish so badly there was somebody out there who could have taught me this all. And now that's why I'm doing it. So I hope I can help somebody.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too, because like as you're going through the modules, I can see a lot of like viewers that I know watch our channel thinking like, yeah, that sounds great for this thus existing six-figure flower farmer. That sounds great for the farm that has employees and staff and experience. And it's like, no, no, no. Like this can be done even before you start your first seed. It can, like you said, you can do a rehab. Like you're entering into year 3 and you're not profitable yet and you're feeling discouraged. It's like, okay, well, we can back up here with these techniques, these tactics, this analysis that you go through in the course. It's like you can do this even though it sounds like big business sounding. It can apply to the side hustle whose goal is 20,000 revenue. You can be profitable with that sales goal going through this. It doesn't have to be like full-time farming mega dream as the goal. At any size farm or lifestyle choice that you're making here for your farm, you can apply these principles. So like for our viewers and stuff that I know watch our channel because they like watching our farm work towards profitability and build up in the way that we are, that this is what we talk about, but it's coming from you, Jenny, who's thrown the spaghetti, who's walked the walk, who's actually achieved what these goals are. And we can kind of have that hand holding that, like you said, you wish you had. So like, I'm really thankful. I was telling my husband the other day, it's like, we're thankful for the Florette bubble of flower farming, and she's done so much work, and there's been so much other people that have come and like really taught us how to grow flowers, like you talked about. Like it's a lot of great content out there now to learn how to grow a snapdragon beautifully. And now in the industry it seems like, okay, like we've gotten our arms around creating helpful content on how to grow with excellence, but we really need to speak on profitability so that these farms can continue to exist and local flowers can be a much bigger domestic product and stuff. And you can't do that if you never make money, because then you're no longer a business. So I'm really thankful that you're putting all this effort into this kind of content creation that's clearly really needed, so that we can say, like, for my husband and I, we can say like, we're a year 8 Oklahoma flower farm because we've been profitable, you know, and we haven't gotten burned out and discouraged with poor choices and stuff like that. So thank you for sharing. I will link, is that everything? Let me back up real fast. Do you have, Is there anything else you're launching and stuff so I didn't miss anything?
No, no,
Okay.
that was everything. Thank you
Okay,
so
good.
much.
Yeah. So thank you, Jenny, for your time. I will link everything she mentioned. I'll put all of her socials, all of the links to her courses and email sign up in the description, and comment, share, like, do all the fun algorithm stuff we always talk about. And thank you for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. We'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Okay, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Yeah, don't touch
Oh,
anything.
Eric,
Make sure it all goes through.
right? Eric. Sometimes we put bloopers at the end of our videos so we seem like real people in our videos and stuff. So it's not just like all highly edited. And so this might make it.
Help.
Yeah, right.